especially from the neurolinguistic side, um, it's really and the psycholinguistic side. What some of my favorite studies are ones where participants' behavior is different from what the more implicit measures, like the neuro measures, are telling you.
Huh.
Oh.
So one of my favorite studies is by I think her name is Judy. Her last name is McLaughlin for sure. McLaughlin and Osterhout and Kim in 2004, I think it is, and they looked at early learners of French. Um, and they were looking at their brain responses to try and see how they were learning French words in the very first semester,
Okay.
very early stages. And they were using a brain response called the N400, which is sensitive to how hard it is to access words in your head.
Hmm.
Okay, there are various theories of what that means, but it's sensitive to that at least.
Okay.
Um, and what so in this effect, if you present native speakers of a language with fake words,
Hmm.
they'll have a really big N400 because it's like their brain is trying to access it and they can't because it's not there.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay. Then if you give them just a word without any supporting context, like let's say you hear the word chair and then you hear the word cat.
Hmm.
In this case, it was a reading study. So read the word chair and then read the word cat, but in French. Um, you'll have like a medium size and 400
Hmm.
because you know the word, but there's nothing there to support it.
Hmm.
Versus if you read the word dog, dog is going to be activated and then it's going to actually spread activation to other words
Mm.
Hmm.
that are related to it. And so when you get cat, it's easier to access because you've already like pre-activated some of its features.
Ah,
So
okay.
then the N400 is smaller.
Okay.
So for native speakers, you get this three-way split between fake words, primed words, and non-primed words and then primed words.
Okay.
And so they were looking for at these non-native French speakers in their very first semester, and giving them these three types of words. And what they found is that after only an average of like 12 hours of classroom instruction, they already showed a difference between real words and fake words.
Mm.
Wow.
Um, Even though no difference between the primed and the unprimed, so they didn't know the meanings yet, but they could recognize what were real words and what weren't. And
Wow.
then by the end of the semester, they showed that three-way split. And
Hmm.
the coolest part of that study is that they were also asked just to identify, is this a word or not?
Hmm.
And they were basically a chance. So they
Wow.
were guessing if these were real words, but their brains showed evidence that they knew it.
So it's crazy.
Yeah.
So could you get like a word that's I would say uh phonologically constructed to be a French word,
hmm
and is like, okay, this sounds like a French word, but it's not a French word.
hmm
So could they tell these words apart or no?
Yeah. So all the ones, these were all written,
Right.
and all of these non words were actually called pseudo words in that
Pseudo
they
words.
were possible French words. They just weren't real French words, like nazier, Nasier,
Hmm.
nazier. That's not a French word,
Yeah.
Yeah.
but it looks like it could be one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So could
And their brain was distinguishing those.
What?
But
oh,
they were guessing when they tried to say if it was a real word.
but how could they guess it? What's going on in the brain?
Yeah, that's a good question. So it seems like the brain is so good at keeping track of things that it's seen.
Hmm.
And so even though after only like 12 hours of exposure, the brain was already like, I've seen that. I know that's
Mm.
real because I've seen it before versus I've never seen this, even though it looks like it could be one.
Wow.
And so, but then when they came time to telling whether it was a real word or not, that knowledge wasn't to a point that they could rely on it yet
Fascinating.
consciously. And so we're actually running a replication of that right now,
Huh.
looking at French learners, but also at Chinese learners, because Chinese characters are really hard for English speakers
Sure.
and for Chinese speakers. It takes a lot of effort for them to learn. Um, and what we're seeing basically is a similar pattern for both languages, but the Chinese does take a little bit longer.
Mm.
Mm.
Now, that could be because in French, you can easily like look at a word and sound it out and say, I don't think I've heard that. So you can rely on things you've heard and read in the classroom.
Oh,
Mm.
okay.
Whereas in Chinese, if you don't know the character, especially as a beginner,
Uh-huh.
it's hard to guess what the character is going to sound like. But
Sure.
once you get more proficient, you can get better at seeing a character and guessing what it will be.
Ah,
Um,
interesting.
but so you can't sound it out. So it could just be that because they're not as transparent
Mhm.
phonologically that they're take a longer time to recognize them. Potentially, that's one possible explanation.
Hmm.